This is the true story of Candy Montgomery, housewife accused of murdering her friend Betty Gore. Why did she do it? The movie opens up with the morning of the murder. Betty is disappointed that her husband Alan will be away for work again. Subsequently, Candy and her husband Pat are babysitting Betty's daughter Christina for today. Later in the afternoon, Candy is rushing to park Betty's car back into the garage. Her hair is wet and she has a major slit mark on her forehead. We can assume this is the time she had just finished killing her friend. Candy is cleaning up her mess by washing her clothes. She even takes a shower in Betty's house. Since Alan is out of town, he has been calling his wife all day, but Betty doesn't pick up. Cries of their baby can be heard in the background. By night, Alan is super worried since Betty hasn't answered any of his calls. He gets 3 neighbors to check up on Betty. They finally enter the house through an open door and find Betty's bloody body right next to an axe. In the past, we find out that Betty was a kind woman, but also petty. She would give all her students detention because someone had thrown eggs at her house. Later, Betty and Alan decide to foster a child named David. Even though Betty was kind, Candy and her friends weren't always nice and welcoming to Betty. They thought Betty acted like she was better than everyone else just because she is a foster parent. Meanwhile, Candy has been getting a bit antsy since her marriage has lost its spark. She would read erotica in the bathtub to enjoy herself. The foster child becomes a huge challenge for Betty, who eventually wants to let David go back to the foster system. When David leaves the family, it creates a large emotional separation between Alan and Betty. Eventually, Candy approaches Alan at their nightly volleyball game. All the sweaty bodies really got Candy going. She hops into Alan's car and tells him that she wants to have an affair with him. The two go over the logistics of the affair. They even have a pros and cons table up. And yes, they actually did do this in real life. They wanted to be a friends with benefits situation where no emotional attachment is involved. Subsequently, Betty reveals that she is now pregnant. The two start the affair off at a sleazy hotel room. Candy goes the extra lengths to prepare. Alan vents about how annoying Betty has become. Then the two do their extracurricular activities. 2 months later, Candy and Betty's daughters become good friends, which in turn brings Candy and Betty closer together. Candy tells Betty that she isn't even fat. Then, Candy reassures Betty that Alan isn't having an affair. Later, Candy and Alan get it on in the hotel room. However, Alan is no longer excited at night when Betty tries to seduce him. Throughout their affair, Alan would lie saying he is going out for a jog. But instead he would meet up with Candy at their hotel. She admits that she's growing feelings for Alan, so this has to be their last time meeting up. However, Alan says he needs this and it's not their last time. He hasn't had enough of her body. Then she hops on his banana in excitement. Later, Betty tries to salvage her marriage by going to a marriage retreat to help them re-spark their relationship. At Betty's baby shower, Candy tells Sherry about her affair with Alan. It's awkward when Alan is there because Candy starts to realize her feelings for him are getting really strong. Then Candy gets really paranoid that Betty knows about the affair. In their hotel room, Alan reveals that Betty actually admitted to having a one-night stand. Alan thinks the marriage retreats have been working, so he wants to end the affair. Candy agrees while she hides her disappointment. 3 months have passed and Betty finally confronts Candy about their friendship dying down. Candy pretends nothing is wrong at all. She goes back to her family and there's an emptiness in her eyes, like something is missing. One night, Pat discovers a card from Alan to Candy. Because Pat is a simp, he decides to buy Candy flowers to salvage what's left of their marriage. This transitions to Pat's testimony in court, who defends his wife. He says Candy is a non-violent person. On the day Betty died, Deputy Defy questions the neighbors who discovered Betty's body. Apparently the baby cried so long that the baby ended up losing her voice. The police officers take photos of the crime scene and take a shoe print as evidence. They even find lenses from sunglasses. The morning after, Alan finally comes home from his work trip. Defy questions him if he's had an affair, but Alan lies and says he's never had an affair. He tells the officer that Candy had visited Betty in the morning. The deputy says most likely the murderer is someone that hated Betty since there was no forced entry. Meanwhile, the entire neighborhood is talking about the murder. They wonder who could do such a thing. Eventually, Candy and Pat drop off Christina back to Alan. Alan consoles Christina and weirdly, Candy goes to console them as well. Meanwhile, Pat stares awkwardly at the three. Later, Alan calls Deputy Defy to admit to his affair with Candy. While riding her husband, Defy gives Candy a ring to schedule an interrogation. At the interrogation, Candy lies and says she was the one who ended the affair. She even says she doesn't have any feelings for Alan. They take pictures and process her fingerprints. Before she leaves, Officer Denny notices a red mark on her shoe. The cop even takes pictures of her cut on her feet. Candy says it's from playing with her kids. Defy wonders if Candy is willing to take a polygraph test on if she killed Betty or not. She agrees to this. Later at night, Alan watches a report about the murder of his wife. Betty was struck 41 times with an axe. Eventually, Alan calls his in-laws to let them know about his affair with Candy. They're pissed at him. Later, Candy hears from a friend that the cops found a footprint, so Candy starts to cut up the slippers she used during the murder. The next day, Candy goes to a lawyer, Don Crowder, for advice. He says she shouldn't take a polygraph test. On the day of the funeral, Candy and Sherry are helping around the house. Candy is triggered by the baby crying. Then she goes to the room where she killed Betty. She remembers all the blood and the axe in the room. At the funeral, Betty's mom and daughter cry a lot. After the funeral, Alan mourns the death of his wife. Later, Pat reads the newspaper saying they found a fingerprint. This makes Candy really worried, so she goes to see her lawyer. She admits to killing Betty. However, Candy says it was in self-defense. Meanwhile, Pat goes to take out the trash and he sees the cut-up shoes that Candy threw out. However, he just leaves it there. Late at night, Pat finds an axe in the garage and he starts chopping some wood with it until he's hit it 41 times. The same amount of times Candy hit Betty with an axe. He then goes to hug his wife tightly. The cops go through a possible timeline of the altercation between Candy and Betty. They think Candy hit Betty from behind and Betty's sunglasses fell. However, this evidence can't be used since a cop had touched the sunglass lens before it was processed as evidence. Apparently, Betty's eyes were chopped out. They conclude that Candy accidentally hit her feet when axing Betty, therefore the self-inflicted marks on her foot. On the day of the trial, news reporters crowd around Candy before she enters the courthouse. The judge is upset that Don Crowder did a press conference with the media when he wasn't supposed to. Then, Candy pleads not guilty to murdering Betty. Later, Alan takes the stand and describes his not-so-great marriage. Alan lies and says him and Candy agreed to end the affair amicably. The prosecutors are surprised to hear this because this isn't what Alan said before. Alan says he can't believe Candy would do something like this. When Deputy Defy takes the stand, Don reveals to everyone that Candy did kill Betty. Everyone, including Candy's friend Sherry, is shocked to hear this. However, Don suggests that Betty was the one who came at Candy with an axe first. It was in self-defense. However, Deputy Defy says the way the axe chops were angled looks like it's not self-defense. After the court hearing, Candy and Don tells everyone that Candy probably dissociated when she axed Betty. During this time, Sherry and Pat buy all of Candy's BS. Candy eventually takes the stand and describes the day of the murder. She goes to Betty's house to pick up Christina's bathing suit. Supposedly, Betty brings up the affair that Candy had with Alan. Candy admits to the affair. Then Betty grabs an axe from the utility room. Betty supposedly says Candy can't have Alan. Then Candy says the affair was over a long time ago. Betty puts the axe away as if nothing happened. Candy apologizes to Betty for the affair. But then Betty pushes Candy into the utility room and grabs the axe. Betty says Candy can't have Alan this time. Candy cries in court while testifying and says Betty hit Candy first. She says Betty had the intention of killing her. The two fight for the axe, but eventually Candy gets the upper hand. Betty supposedly wouldn't let Candy go and they even fight some more. This led to Candy hitting Betty multiple times. 41 times to be exact, but she describes dissociating during this time. The scene is a bloody one with Candy hitting Betty all over her body and face. Betty is completely mangled. She then describes how all the blood made her sick, so she had to take a shower. She does a really good job crying in front of the jurors. Candy lies and says she didn't want Alan. Meanwhile, the ghost of Betty is shocked to see that everyone in court believes Candy. Then the prosecutor wonders if Candy had an affair after Alan. Candy admits that yes, she did have another affair with a married man. Candy eventually tells Pat that there was a second man she had an affair with. Pat is furious about this, but they try to calm him down. They tell him that Candy having a second affair shows that she wasn't hung up on Alan. In their closing statements, Don mentions Betty's fascination with the movie The Shining, and how it's possible Betty got the idea from the movie. He says Candy clearly did this in self-defense. The prosecutor reminds everyone the importance of how there's a lack of evidence proving Betty ever touched the axe at all, and there's no way that Candy axed her 41 times without realizing what she was doing. The ghost of Betty is disappointed that the prosecutor didn't try hard enough. The jury has reached a verdict and finds Candy not guilty. The courtroom is shocked. Betty's parents are appalled at this. Candy says she's happy that things will get back to normal. However, Pat is still upset about the second affair Candy had. Even her best friend Sherry is nowhere to be found. Alan eventually remarried a woman named Elaine shortly after the trial. Candy and Pat divorced 4 years later. Candy relocated and changed her name. She ironically became a mental health counselor.
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.